Well, hello there. My name is HW, and thank you so much for watching Tone Junkie TV. This, my friends, is what a $7,000 amp looks like. This is a 1957 Fender 5E7 Bandmaster amplifier. It's a 310. It's got the original speakers, although one of them is missing a bell cover, which probably does not affect the sound at all. It has had a little bit of maintenance work done, but it's got an original rewound transformer. At one point, this amp did not have the original transformer, but it was repaired and put back in the amp. You can see a bunch of shots here. This thing just has a beautiful, beautiful patina. Sometimes you find amps that are just worn in such a magnificent, magical way. To me, I don't know about you, but I'm a tone junkie. And to me, guitar amplifiers are just beautiful. Guitar gear is beautiful. I would rather surround myself with lots of these old amps than, find pictures of art and stuff. And that's why I just put gear kind of all around me in my life. I just think the look of this thing, look at some of this, how the tweed wears down, how it's coming off. You can see the wood. You can see this tweed to touch, still has the lacquer on it, but it's smooth and it's beautiful. And it's just, to me, this is the romantic side of gas and gear collecting that I think is just magnificent. Now, a lot of people will notice that this amplifier looks a lot like what you might expect a 59 Bassman to look like. And Fender did reissue this amp some years ago, but I'll tell you, there's nothing like playing a 63-year-old classic vintage amplifier that's been put through the paces, especially when it's been looked over and glossed over. This amplifier sounds like $1 million. If you're not familiar with the Bandmaster 5E7 circuit, all of these sort of mid-late 50s Fenders are just some of the best amps you can find. Obviously, the most famous ones being the 5E3, the little Fender Deluxe, and the Fender 59 Bassman. But this was an amplifier that sort of sat in the middle of those two. This is a 26L6 amplifier, but it's got a smaller output transformer than you would find in, say, like a 59 Bassman. As a result, it doesn't have quite as much low end, but it still has the gruntiness of a tweed amplifier. I would say it doesn't have the low headroom, sort of smaller amp feel of a 5E3, but it doesn't quite have the extra headroom of the Bassman or have as much low-end girth. It will rumble a room, but it's sort of, the 5E7 is kind of regarded as one of the great amplifiers of all time because it actually sits tonally sort of in the middle. It's really a special amplifier for the reason that the 310 combo was lighter than a 410, slightly lower in volume, but it had more of a gigging sort of ability because it was bigger than the 5E3 Tweed Deluxe. And because of that, real amp collectors, real sort of tone junkies and amp gurus have a special place in their heart for these old Tweed Bandmasters. They really are phenomenal sounding amplifiers. You're probably thinking, HW, please shut up and play the damn thing. Okay, fine, I will, but one more thing. 3 10-inch speakers, which I'm miking right here with just a simple 906. I have tried miking this amplifier up. I have done a bunch of stuff with it, testing in this room and in my amp room, my little quiet amp room that I built, and then feeding the signal into here and listening through some studio monitors. I'm really having the experience where the 906 really grabs what I love about this amplifier. And so I think I'm gonna have to make some profiles for the Kemper with that 906, because it really, sometimes you mic up an amp in a room and you listen to it in that room and it sounds great, and then you go listen to the mic feed and you really have to work the microphones in to get out of the microphones what you were hearing as a player. But really just sort of putting this 906 just off the center of the cone a little into a little warmer territory, it really sort of has the bass and the high end and just the tweedy mid-range grunt that I love. Now, if you know anything about these amplifiers, you know that all these old Tweeds have a mic channel and an instrument channel. And the thing that's great about those sorts of setups is it's kind of like a normal channel and a bright channel, but not really. The instrument channel is sufficiently bright, but the mic channel just has a little more sort of girth and push, but they're both very, very usable. Sometimes in amplifiers where there's a normal channel and a bright channel, you get a little too much girthy gruntiness from the normal channel. You see that in Marshalls a lot. That's why they always sound best when they're sort of jumpered. But anyway, I've got a little bit of ground loop buzz in this room because I've got a bunch of LED lights and I'm sending live power to an overhead microphone here. So bear with me, but here is a beautiful Telecaster that I absolutely love. I get a lot of questions about this thing all the time. Look at this thing. I believe it's Lawler pickups, but it's a pine body. It's just a joy to play, and I'm going to show you what this amplifier sounds like now and why I get so excited about this thing. No effects. This is straight the 906 going right in. This is what the amp sounds like if you took it to a gig and mic'd it up. Here is the neck of this Telecaster. Now, you know, one of the things I love about these old amplifiers is just the way they handle guitars very differently. You know, there you heard a Tele, and again, this is no effects. I mean, things sound even bigger and sort of fuller when you get a little room in there, but I really want to give you the authentic sound of this amplifier through this 906. And because this is the type of tone that people would use a lot, right? When you would go to a club or a church or a bar or whatever, you would get usually a single dynamic microphone, but old amplifiers to me really just possess a voice that is difficult to replicate. You know, I always sort of phrase it this way. I could buy a brand new amp today and love it, but I feel as time goes on, I begin to understand that amplifier and I know how it's going to sound before it sounds that way. Like I can fully sort of remember its sound and its nuances, but sometimes you find old amps, and I find it with most old vintage amps, they have just a sort of musical quality about them, a quality that I would describe as you're playing the amp as much as you play the guitar, because it seems that no matter how much I play them, I can only really remember about 85% of the tone. And there's this extra 15% of the tone that just sort of moves around and swirls around and just makes it sound a little sweeter than I remember, even just last time I turned it on. I also really love the way that they just sound different with different pickups. So here's a fatter, warmer guitar. You know, this is kind of like a Les Paul-y type thing, and to me it's better than a Les Paul, but what do I know? And I think on the neck, this thing just sounds monstrous. I'm going to put on to just get a little fatness and a little gain. And first I'm going to show you the instrument channel, and then we're going to jump over to the mic channel. So first, here is the instrument channel. And now here is the mic channel. Little fatter, little more girth. Using the neck and bridge of a Les Paul like that, you really get a feel for how sensitive these old amplifiers can be, and how sensitive tube amplifiers can be. They're really a joy to play, and it's really why I get excited about old classic circuits like this. They're not classic just because, there's lots of amplifiers from this 50s and 60s that are not sort of as heralded as Fender and Marshall and Vox, and there's reason for that. There's some great stuff out there, and amps like Supros have a thing, but that's the thing, they really have a thing. Whereas you get amplifiers like this, and they have so many shades and beautiful colors and textures in them. I mean, we're really only scratching the surface on what this amplifier can do, just showing you a couple different guitars. Be beautiful and thick and clean, and then also sort of grunty and grindy, and that's really the Tweed sort of quality, this sort of grunt that is really well suited for rock music. This is famously an amp used by The Who and stuff, and a bunch of other people in classic. I think some old Montrose recordings were actually this, sort of a predecessor to Van Halen sound. And it's that grunty thing that really gives you a nice, beautiful, just sort of sound, And having the smaller transformer in here actually makes for a very giggable tone without having to do a ton of like sculpting to the low end or anything. Let me show you a couple positions that I really like on the Stratocaster. And again, you throw a little reverb on here and you are just in heaven. I'm showing you dry stuff. And it's actually a little challenging to play fully dry for me because I never really do that. But you can really hear the voice of these guitars come out. So let me run you through just a couple pickup positions here. We'll start with the neck, and we'll go all the way down. Again, I'm now back in the mic channel, and I am going to clean it up. I'm going to leave it. The amplifier, I'm going to put about all the way just sort of at noon, so about 6 on the mic volume setting, and my settings, the presence just a little below 5. I've got the bass up a bit, and the trebles down a little below 12 o'clock too, just to sort of balance out the brightness of the Stratocaster. I think for me there really is like a connection that I feel, you know, whenever I encounter an amp like this. It feels like someone put this together, you know, in a time that doesn't exist anymore. And this was their best idea. You know, a mic channel and a guitar. Why? Because guys who play the guitar sing. And how do we want people to hear our music, you know? Well, let's make something that makes us as loud as the drums. We'll put it on one side. And what about the bass player? Yeah, we'll make a 410 for him. And he'll plug in and boo, 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 boo. And the guitar player, you know, he'll do his thing. And it's even before the time of like, hey, can we make it sound like reverby? Like, can we make it sound like it's more further back in a big room or something? And this was the best idea, you know? It was like, well, how do we produce sound? Well, we know how to produce sound in like a PA or like a radio. You use tubes, right? Well, let's make tubes really loud. Well, how loud do we need it? How about as loud as drums, you know? And we'll just plug everything into there. And that was sound design at the time, you know? That was amplification at the time. We need people to hear the music. How are they going to hear? We need a big box with speakers. There wasn't this sort of idea of like one sound source. Let's keep stage volume low. You know, stage volume was the volume. And this is coming out of a time when guitar had largely, before the electric guitar and before it was amplified, guitar had been not a solo instrument. You know, in orchestras and stuff, in big bands, they would have guitars, but it would always be the clack, clack, clack of the strings that would come through. And it was actually amplifiers and those big hollow bodies with pickups and amplifiers like this, big boxes with speakers that gave guys the ability to play single notes on the guitar and be heard over the rest of the band. You can imagine a single note on a guitar is nowhere near as loud as a trumpet. And that early in the guitar's history was what it had to compete with in the big band environment. And so these things are a really special part of history. I am a modernist, and I feel that too much love for tubes and old designs actually stifles creativity. I think as guitar players we're involved in a lot of like mythology and folklore around tube amplifiers, and we like to pretend that somehow a computer can't calculate harmonics, right? But music and vibration is math, and computers are exceedingly good at that. You are listening to this amplifier, not from the tubes, not from the rattling in this room, but from the capture and reproduction of vibration that's then put into your ear that sounds like this. If you think about how this sound is getting from this room, this guitar, this amplifier to your ears, it's really a testament to technology. But at the time, this was the best technology we had, and it shapes the value of the guitar. It shapes its tone and its characteristics. And we decided that these types of characteristics of breakup were what was desirable because this is what was available. And we still go for that. That's the sound of guitar in our head. I think that's a really beautiful thing. I think these are pieces of history. And I love that when you play the guitar, you just get these sort of beautiful notes that they just ring out a little more. Like this is one of my favorite tones on this amplifier. Let me try to dial something up here real quick. And I just feel like that sound sitting next to this thing, you know, is like the closest thing we have to time machines, to closing your eyes and sort of being transported back to Leo and, you know, Esmeralda and Abigail winding these pickups and Carla sort of wiring this thing up with a soldering iron. I mean, it's such an honest, beautiful history of like who built these things and where they came from and early manufacturing. And it's just, I mean, look, this thing is tweed. Do you know why? Because suitcases were tweed. This is a suitcase handle from the 1950s. I mean, this is not a revolutionary box, but it is. They thought, this is a big box. What do you cover big boxes in? We use tweed and lacquer because it's durable. And now we call them tweeds. And it sums up a sound. The tweed sound is now mostly remembered for guitar. You know, nobody at Samsonite is going, let's charge a lot of money for old tweed suitcases. Yeah, right. Plastic has replaced all that. Leather came afterwards. This handle, they break off. We developed better technology, but we love the sound of these tube amps because when I close my eyes and I play a custom shop Stratocaster like this, and I know that these stamped metal pieces were produced from the same stamp machines as the very first ones, and that if this were a crime lab, you could forensically match these stamped plates on this guitar to the very first Fender Stratocasters and Telecasters that exist because they're the same press machines. If you realize that the same people in a factory very close to the one that made the original pickups, but with the same winding machines, if you realize that you could stand on top when they do inventory and see 1958, 1959, 1961, the inventory stickers from when they counted that machine in the inventory. If you realize that these pickups from the custom shop here are hand wound and that each one is unique and then each one is placed in a set unit, these are snowflakes. There's not another one like it in the world. And then you play through this incredibly old machine and you are able to close your eyes and realize this is the note that Leo heard. This is the note the first owner heard. It's different tubes. It's broken in. But the speakers over time have smoothed out. It probably sounds better today than it did back then. I don't know, man. This amp could be $1,000 or $5,000 or $10,000 or $100,000. That is special. That is magic. That's as close as I know how to get to connecting with all those old guys, with all the old music, to just hear something that sort of transcends time. I must sound high or something, but I'm not. I just really love old stuff. And as much as I'm not a purist, as much as I'm a Kemper guy, and a digital guy, and an IR guy through and through, I'm a tone junkie. And I love stories. Well, I guess there's only one thing left to do. We're going to let one technology keep our sound alive and get into as many hands as possible. Profile the world.